This is episode 85 of the Juicebox Podcast, and it is sponsored by OmniPod. Okay, so Basil's behind me snoring while I record this introduction, but I just have to tell you a little bit about this episode. There he goes. So I record these sometimes months in advance of you hearing them, sometimes days in advance, and then I go back and I edit. When I edit, I get to sort of hear it for the first time, not while I'm directly involved in it. Sometimes I realize more happened than I thought. And this is definitely one of those. This is Katie. Katie's an adult who has had type 1 diabetes since she was a younger child. Katie is very open and honest about how much she just ignored her type 1 diabetes for many, many years. She talks about what snapped her into it. She talks about her family and the impact that may have had on it. This is keep snoring, Basil. This is a very, very interesting and personal episode of the Juicebox Podcast. On top of that, the dogs interrupted us one time. This was recorded during the summer. Arden's blood sugar got really low. You're going to kind of hear that happen. This one's good. I mean, I say they're all good, and I think they are. Maybe this one's better than good. This one's informative. It's interesting. It's honest. It's real. Yeah, this is Katie.
Hello?
Katie?
Yeah.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thanks. You sound good.
Thanks.
What's your setup? What are you using for headphones?
It's called the Jabra Revo headphones.
Really? Works great. It's fantastic. Yeah. Excellent. Okay, cool. So you're nervous?
A little bit.
Because you think you're going to overshare?
Yeah, that and just like public speaking in general is kind of like, I know people listen to it, so.
Well, nobody's listening right now, though. Right now, it's just
true.
You and me.
That's true.
Yeah, that's all. It's going to be fun. Cool. So if you're ready, we'll just jump right in.
Okay.
Cool. Just introduce yourself, and then I will ask you a bunch of silly questions. You'll answer them, and we'll be done before you know it.
Okay. So my name's Katie. I've been type 1 for 15 years. Yeah.
There you go, Katie. So what are you about? Yeah. You're 27?
I'm 27.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Diagnosed when you're 12.
Yep.
All right. Let's see where to start. Being diagnosed at 12 seems like it would not be easy. You're just about, if not kind of already moving into puberty, right? Or if not almost there. Mm-hmm. Probably becoming more and more aware every day of just who you are and, what you're trying to present into the world and everything. And then all of a sudden this happened. So that's 2000 and... hold on. 2012? 2002?
2001. Maybe it was 2012.
Right?
I don't know.
My math is stellar, as you can tell. So, okay, so the early 2000s, and you're diagnosed. Is that insulin pump time, or what do they give you then?
So I was MDI for about 8 months, mm-hmm. and then they put me on a pump.
All right, great. So you've been on a pump ever since?
Uh-huh.
Did you at any point get on a CGM?
Yes. So in January this year.
Oh, just recently?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very recently.
Okay, so diagnosed at 12, what's the first big issue? Is it during the school year when you're diagnosed, or is it summertime?
Yeah, so it was in April. So my symptoms lasted for quite a while. Mm-hmm. I probably 2 to 3 months is where I was really noticing like I was thirsty, going to the bathroom a lot, and I kind of was hiding it from my parents. I'm kind of a person who doesn't like a lot of attention on themselves, and I didn't for some reason I just didn't want my parents to know how sick I was. And
so you had a feeling you were ill.
I could tell I was going to the bathroom a lot and drinking a lot. And then towards the end, when I was like throwing up and stuff, I actually was hiding from my parents that I was throwing up. So yeah, by that point I knew I was sick, but my mom did know that I threw up. She just didn't know how often I was throwing up.
Right.
So
what pushed it over the edge? How did it come to a head and you ended up at the doctor?
So my mom's best friend had a son that's a type 1 diabetic. And so he'd been diagnosed 3 years before, also at the age of 12. And we were at her house. She did our hair. And she was doing my hair, and she told my mom, Katie looks really sick. Something's wrong with her. Do you care if I go and get my son's meter and we can check her blood sugar? So they test my blood sugar, and it just says high.
Right.
And she says, you need to take Katie to the doctor, like to the emergency room now. And so my mom also, I think the whole family, we're just kind of like these denial people. So she wanted to take me to the Instacare, and we went, and it was closed. Mm-hmm. And so the next morning, I went to school, and my mom's friend called her and said, I didn't want to bother you guys last night. I'm sure because she was sure that I was a diabetic.
Right.
And she said, I didn't want to bother you guys last night, but I just wanted to call and check in how you guys are doing. And she goes, Katie's at school. And so my mom's friend dropped everything she was doing and drove straight to my school. And she checked me out of school, and she drove me to the hospital. And my mom, who was at work, left work and met her at the hospital. And my mom checked me into the emergency room. That's
a very good friend. Are you still close?
Yeah, actually, I see her probably every 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, so. That's really spectacular that she was concerned enough for you to just go from being like politely like, hey, I didn't want to bother you, to I'm going to go get your kid out of school now and take him to the doctor. So that's really great.
Yeah.
That's excellent. Yeah. All right, so if you're throwing up, you're in DKA?
Yeah, I'm assuming I was in DKA for probably at least a week, if not more.
How bad? How high was your blood sugar by the time you got there?
It was 880.
Yeah, that's high. How long did it take you to get out of the hospital?
I was there for 3 days.
Okay, that seems about right. Now, so when you leave, what's it like trying to absorb all this and get started in a new life when you're 12?
So, I actually took on the responsibility very quickly. Mm-hmm. In fact, the nurse, when she came in for my first insulin shot, and she's like, Kat, I'm going to do it for you this time, and then we'll practice. And I was like, well, can I just do it? And so she handed it to me, and I just did it myself. And so my parents never gave me injections. I was my mom would remind me to test, but I was in charge of dosing and everything from the get-go.
Well, that's excellent. So, and is that just so it's sort of interesting, right? Because it's a little bit of a black and white situation here. Like when you were sick, you didn't want to tell anybody, but once you knew you were sick, you were like, I can handle this.
Yeah, I think part of it, of me I'm going to handle this, was because I didn't want the attention on me. And if someone else was handling it, then they were thinking of me. And
no, so that's what I was trying to get to.
Yeah, it's making it a bigger deal than what I wanted it to be.
So that is definitely what I was trying to get to. So you are a private person. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so there's probably nothing you wouldn't do to keep the spotlight off of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, how did that work? Did it work out well? Did you get to school and were you able to stay as private as you wanted to be, or how did it go?
So April school was about to finish up. So I actually I think I only took 1 day off of school to stay at home, and then the next day I was at school. So everybody knew. In fact, another friend, her dad was my nurse, and the day that I missed for school, he came in and talked to the class about diabetes. And then, so it was just the tail end of my 6th grade year.
Yeah.
Everyone was they knew about it. And I don't think I could have avoided keeping the spotlight off of me right then. But then the next year, 7th grade, was middle school for me. Mm-hmm.
And so you switched buildings?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I switched buildings, and a whole new group of kids. So the people who knew me from elementary school knew, but they never knew it was a big deal or anything like that. And then other people, I didn't necessarily hide that I was a diabetic, but I thought testing my blood sugar would gross people out, so I didn't want people to see me test my blood sugar or give shots, because
That's how it felt then.
It grossed him out. Mm-hmm.
Do you still feel that way?
Yes and no. So now, like at work, if I need to test my blood sugar, if someone's directly talking to me or like in front of me, then I just do it anyways. But like I still won't like whip it out and be like, hey, everyone, I just kind of...
Everyone gather around while I make myself bleed. And
yeah,
no, I get that. It's interesting because just a couple of episodes ago, I talked to a 14-year-old boy named Ian, and he had such an insight about how to present himself in the world. And so I was just interested in how you were doing it too. But okay, so you're 12 years old, you're in school, you're not hiding, you're trying to stay private, but it's probably not all that possible. You're going along okay. So now, before I ask my question, I have a different question.
Okay.
Since you're so private, tell me what made you reach out and say that you'd like to come on and do the podcast.
So I actually recently, after getting Dexcom, and then I actually recently also switched to OmniPod.
Oh, cool.
And so now with 2 devices, and they're kind of... So before I had... I've had both Medtronic and Animas, but I was on Medtronic. And the insertion site kind of doesn't show as much, and I never really wore it on my arms. But with having 2 things that need sites now, and you run out of real estate, I started using my arms more, and I kind of have become... Like, people started asking more questions, and, like, I've kind of, because everything's a lot more visible now, I've kind of become more of an advocate, kind of like, oh, yeah, let me teach you about diabetes.
Oh, so that's interesting. So that you basically didn't have an option to hide it because you went to some different gear, basically, that's a little more obvious to people if you're wearing a short sleeve shirt or shorts or something like that. And just the knowledge that they already knew made you comfortable telling them more?
Yeah.
Wow. That's cool. I don't know how to characterize that, but that's sort of fantastic. So can you extrapolate back to being 12 years old? Do you think that if that would have happened sooner, do you think you would have felt that way sooner? Do you think it's more of an adult concept for you?
That's a really interesting question. I don't know. I think it a lot also depends on reactions. So yeah, I think that me being an adult kind of helps with that because I don't always get positive reactions when people ask questions, especially strangers.
Okay. Do you have an example of a negative reaction?
Yeah, I think pity is definitely the reaction that bothers me the most.
Yeah.
And that's a very common one that especially strangers or that, they'll see it and then, oh, are you okay? And like, that must be horrible for you. And I didn't really like the pity kind of a thing. And so, yeah.
Have you ever tried going, yes, it is pretty horrible?
I haven't. No, I always, oh no, it's no big deal, and I'm used to it.
It's fine. I don't mind at all. It's all great. I love sitting up till 3 a.m, making sure I'm not going to get so low while I'm sleeping that I can't help myself. It really is a party. Yeah. Okay. So Katie, you're really interesting because you're a confliction of a lot of different ideas, which I think makes this really kind of fun to talk about. So, you talked about in your email that I think you called your A1Cs tragic.
Yes, they were.
So you took control right away at 12. Your parents probably, I'm assuming, and maybe I'm wrong, but they were like, "Oh, look, she's got it. This is great."
Yep.
But you had it in as much as you were doing your best, but not doing, I guess, to the level that you would hope, maybe as an adult looking back now, would have hoped your health was at. Is that about right?
So the first and second year were better. Mm-hmm. Well, especially, so when I was on MDI, it was like the planned meals where you eat 60 grams of carbohydrate this meal and 40 for this meal or whatever.
I see.
And then the first year with my pump, I was still pretty good about counting carbs and, well, fairly good. I would still sometimes forget to bolus or something like that. And then, so probably 14 years old, was when I decided, I'm just going to be me. And I just kind of stopped. I rarely tested. I would only bolus by the time I was, 400 and kept going to the bathroom. That was my sign. Like, well, maybe I should take some insulin.
Gotcha. And so you went for 2 years basically doing what you felt like was a pretty good job to all of a sudden you used the phrase like, I'm just going to be me. So that now the reason you're really great to have on is because you are basically a person in their 20s that has a fairly fresh perspective about what it's like to be 12, 13, 14 years old with diabetes. And so are you able to look back now and put more context into, I just want to be me? Like what was it that having and taking care of your diabetes was bringing into your life that you wanted to let go of?
So I think I really wanted to be different, opposite. I didn't want to be different than other people.
Right.
And I was already feeling pretty different. There was definitely some family situations going on. My father had a brain injury. Well, he had a tumor when I was really young that he had removed, and it caused traumatic brain injury, which made him not necessarily, the nicest of guys sometimes.
Okay.
And so I think I kind of had a bit of a childhood where things were already abnormal, even if I didn't have diabetes. And so I just wanted to stay under the spotlight, and having diabetes was just, I think, too much. And so I just ignored it.
Yeah. So stuff is crazy in your life. And
right.
you're looking to eliminate something that's crazy. And this, at least the day-to-day, moment-to-moment, machinations of taking care of diabetes, you figured if I just stop them, then that's one less thing to do. And then you put it out. So you were still cognitive enough to say, like, well, I don't want to end up back in the hospital. So when my blood sugar gets too high, I'll give myself some insulin and stop it from happening. But I've at least eliminated all the testing and the insulin and all that other sort of stuff. Can I ask you at 14? This is such a hard thing to ask you, but did your parents not intervene? Did they not know it was happening, or did they just? What was their level of connectivity to what you were doing?
So my dad was never connected. My mom would kind of hound me, like, test more, but it wasn't something that was ever, because I think I took care of it so early, it never was a part of her life, and she never really knew how to take care of it either. And so she could say, take care of your diabetes better.
Right, yeah. She could say what anybody could think to say without knowing anything about it.
Right. It's like, with your kids with homework, like, oh, do your homework, but unless you're, like, sitting there helping them with their homework when there's an actual problem, then
yeah,
it's not doing anything. So, I mean, she would kind of nag at me, but she never, stepped in, oh, you should bolus this much, or this is this many carbs in it, or anything like that.
Let me try to understand this and help you, or something like that.
Right.
She basically just looked at you and said, suck less. Is that,
yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, that's pretty fair.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, so you're on your own. Let's be honest. Sounds like you're on your own a little bit. You've got the tools, but you've made a 14-year-old decision to try to minimize it in your life. At what point? Now, this is the last part. That I find interesting. How long did that go on for?
It went on for a really long time. So it almost became my normal to feel high all the time.
Okay.
And so, always thirsty, always going to the bathroom. That was just something that was me. And which is funny because I wanted it to have less attention on me, but I always felt crappy, and I'm always going to the bathroom and stuff. And I think that possibly could put even more attention on me, and I wasn't thinking of the long term. I had gotten so used to my endocrinologist telling me you're not going to have feet, you're going to lose your eyesight and stuff, that it didn't mean anything anymore.
The classic medical determination that you're not going to have feet. So
right.
That's interesting. Let's go down a different road for a second. Because I hear people talk about this in two different ways, right? at what point, as the endocrinologist or the person that only sees you a couple of times a year for 15 minutes, at what point are they down to just like trying to be like, look, your feet are going to fall off, like trying to scare you because they can't live with you. They're obviously, I mean, they're intelligent people. They're seeing you're not taking care of it. Your mom's not that involved, so now maybe they're down to like just trying to like scare you into it. Is there something they could have done at the time that would have snapped you out of it? Because if there is, I think that's valuable for something. Like, what would have? I mean, I can kind of guess. It sounds like you needed a hug, but do you think that would have helped? Do you think if they would have called you into another room and just gave you a hug and said, "Katie, listen, we see how tough your life is, but ignoring your diabetes is not the answer. What can I do to help?" Would it have been one of those "what can I do to help you" situations?
Yeah, so there's kind of two things that could have really helped. One was actually, because the only thing I ever got as far as instruction to diabetes was my 3-day crash course when I was diagnosed, which
not a
as
lot.
a 12-year-old, I had to, get everything. I never felt like it was always like, count your carbs, use your pump to do the correction kind of thing. And that's not really what diabetes is.
Sure.
There's a lot more to it. And so, I mean, I wouldn't say that straight for, I would try at different times. There'd be a endocrinologist appointment where they would upset me, and then, I would try for a little while. And I think that I would try and I'd fail because I was kind of set up for failure.
Okay.
And so I feel like if they actually went through and said, hey, when you bolus for pasta, don't bolus the whole thing because you're going to crash and go super low. Here's the extended bolus on your pump that you have the tool, but no one ever explained it,
How to use it.
like extended boluses or anything like that. So I feel like if they actually went through and trained me better, I think that would have helped for the times that I did want to try.
Mm-hmm.
And then the thing that actually kind of changed the way that I was taking care of my diabetes was, so I got married fairly young. And so I was a married adult.
How young were you?
When I got married, I was a month away from being 22.
I have to tell you, if my dad was angry because of a brain injury and my mom was disconnected from my diabetes, I'd have got married too. I think I would have been like, "Hey, you seem nice."
Yeah.
So you get that is young. My wife was 22 when we got married, and we just celebrated our 20th anniversary just the other day. But at the same time, I think we both realize how unlikely it is that two people who got married so young are still married 20 years later. Like, it just feels like, not that you're not going to, I'm not trying to bum you out here, but like you know what I mean? Like you stack the deck against yourself a little bit if you don't know yourself as well when you're younger. I always tell my kids, like, get married when you're 40. And, but I guess my point is this, is that so you find this person finally, I guess, who cares about you.
Right.
And now are you more comfortable in that situation, not minding the spotlight on you?
So he didn't know exactly what was going on either. And so, he just kind of expected, like, well, she's had it for, I guess, at that time,
Katie must know
about
what she's
10
doing.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she must know what she's doing. So he kind of, he's always been very supportive in what I tell him to be. Like, if I tell him, like, I need support in this, then he'll support me.
Katie, you're already very good at being married.
Yeah.
My husband does what I tell him to do, and I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you have to tell them or they don't know.
Go ahead, please.
So, but actually what it was at a doctor's appointment. There was a certified diabetes educator that talked to me after the doctor's appointment, and I'd probably been married about a year at the time. And she said, you know all the long-term effects. I'm not going to lecture you about those, but have you ever thought your husband doesn't know who the real you is? And she talked to me like, your blood sugar affects your mood, and, he obviously loves you. He got married to you, but don't you think that he would be, so much more in love with a person who's not grumpy at him? And she really hit something there where I started bawling, and like, that was like kind of my thing was like, okay, if I can't do this for me, then I'll do it for my husband.
So, see now how nice this is? Did you ever think we were going to get to this? So you found a reason to not hide.
Yeah.
Right. And let's say now, without impugning anybody too badly, but it makes the point, and people should know this so they can kind of, feel it for themselves. At any point in your life, your doctor, your father, your mother, other people in your life, they could have been somebody who made you feel like you didn't want to hide, but you just didn't have people around you who gave you that feeling. And so if you're in a situation, and now I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to other people. If you're in a situation where you can't find somebody who, for whatever reason, makes you feel like that, then you need to go find that person. Not spend years feeling like Katie did, which was like, look, I'm just going to hide because nobody really cares anyway. And that really is, I mean, there's a lesson in there for you that you're sharing with people. And for that alone, I'm just really grateful that you came on and did the podcast today. But so she makes you cry. We've all cried in an endo office, I'm assuming, at some point, right? So she makes you cry. She makes you think, more importantly, that I do want to present who I am to the people I love.
Yeah.
Wow. It's see how simple that is. And so what's the first step when you're that many years? I mean, I'm doing rough math here, but when you're 8 years into just ignoring your type 1, what's your first step into not ignoring it anymore? How do you start? Cliffhanger. Let's do the ad right here, should we? I'm constantly just really impressed with the people who come on the podcast and share so openly. But Katie she's really sharing openly today. And she's highlighting the importance of community. So, OmniPod understands community too. They're doing their best to reach out on Facebook and Twitter. They've created a feeling of, I really love it. Like, it's called their Podder, Podder. So I'd look for that hashtag if I was you on Twitter or on Facebook. Look for other people who use OmniPods. Podders. Not Harry Potter. That's Potter. Podder with a D. Actually with two Ds. Podder. Check it out. See what other people are doing. I think what Katie's teaching us here is that there's nothing like looking out into the world and seeing somebody who can get what you're going through. And I think OmniPod understands that too. So whether you're an Omnipod user or you're not, check out other people using Omnipods online. Check out the photos, the stories. Their Facebook page is excellent. They really should be commended on putting together a great Facebook page. You'll find it. It's everywhere. But check out the Podder hashtag. Look for Facebook. Look for Omnipod on Facebook and Twitter, and see what community feels like. And if you're part of the community already, share, be a part of it. And if you're not, and you want to try Omnipod, go to myomnipod.com/demo, and you can start a free, no obligation demo right away. Become a podder today. Go to myomnipod.com/demo, or the links in your show notes. Back to Katie.
So that actually was another hard thing. Mm-hmm. So I decided to start taking care of myself better. So just to kind of give you an idea of how bad it was before, my A1Cs would range between the 10 and 13%. Yeah. So, that's when you look at the charts of like complications,
it's where your doctor got your feet falling off. Yeah.
Right. And so then I start trying to take care of myself, which starts off really simple, like back to basics of, okay, let's bolus when we eat and let's test our blood sugar. And that's kind of all I was given. And so my A1Cs dropped to about between 8 and 9% with that.
So now you're down to 8 or 9 is what I think you see when people are earnestly trying, but maybe don't have all the nuance to it yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So, and they're telling you like a minimum of 5 times a day. So you're testing 5 times a day, and that feels so arbitrary and random, Yeah,
it doesn't give you anywhere near the full picture of what's happening. And then it's hard to make decisions.
Right. So, then I go through a ton of endocrinologists that are just I had one that he put me on a trial CGM. I think it was probably the Enlight, I don't know. But he put me on a trial CGM for a week, and they insisted on putting it on my stomach. Well, my stomach has enough scar tissue from the years of I'm only putting it on my stomach that wasn't working. Okay. And so, I think like my sight that day just happened to like bend, and so I had a bad sight and a CGM on that tells, I'm like 300 all day. They're both hurting, so I take them both off. And then I go back to the endocrinologist, and he goes, okay, we're upping your basal rates to what it was when you weren't receiving insulin. And we only have this one day of data, but I'm going to up your basal rates over that. And I'm trying to tell him over and over again, like, no, that's not going to, like, I'm going to be low all the time if you do that. And he just won't listen to me. So I'm like, okay, you're out the door. And I finally get an endocrinologist that's like, let's get you a Dexcom. And I feel like that's really when when my good control started coming in.
Okay. Well, and that's not that long ago, right?
Yeah, that was in January that I received it.
Okay, so it's August now. 8 months later. Mm-hmm. Is it too simplistic to say night and day for you?
It is 100% correct. It just, the light switch went on. Because I was, before the Dexcom arrived, I was really interested in it. I'm the type of person that, you buy a keyboard and I research it for ever. So I hear about the Dexcom. I start looking at the diabetic online community. I start finding out these things like, hey, this is how you use an extended bolus. This is how you do nutrition labels can be up to 20% off. Things like that I just had no idea.
Stuff you wouldn't realize and yeah. And so with more knowledge and with a view of your blood sugar more 24/7 than just testing a handful of times a day, you're able to make better decisions. Are better decisions you pre-bolus now for your meals?
Yes, I pre-bolus and yeah.
So let me tell you something. We'll get off the track real quick here, but I get a lot of emails from people, and I love getting your emails. So keep sending them. My A1C went from this to this after I listened to the podcast, or this happened, or I stuck up for myself, or all these great things. But one really struck me recently from a woman who went into her endocrinologist with a 2-point reduction in her A1C. And this is an adult with type 1, and the endo said, just astonished. How did you go from the 8s to the 6s? What did you do? And this person starts describing pre-bolusing, and the endo responded, I've never heard of that before.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, jeez.
Yeah, those are the people that are giving us our information of
I just really was like,
how to survive.
her doctor doesn't understand how insulin works.
Yeah.
Imagine all the other things that aren't being said or are being said incorrectly and leading people down unnecessary paths, not unlike the one you were on, and it's sad. But we're trying to reach people and let them know that there's other ways to think about stuff, and you're a big part of that today. So, okay, Katie. So 8 months in, what's it feel like not to have high blood sugar?
It's amazing. So I feel like seeing a 200 now is a rarity. It's, something like, whoa, I must have missed something.
Right.
Where in the past, 300 or 400 wasn't rare to see. Right. And so, yeah, I feel like I have a lot more energy.
Did your husband notice?
Happier. So actually, the funny thing with that is, so having tighter control and figuring it out at first meant a couple of low blood sugars. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a nice person when I have low blood sugar.
I don't think anyone is.
So I think that at first he was like, this is making you more grumpy. But I think now
he gets it.
He gets it, yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that something? So you don't, this, I'm going to extrapolate a little here based on everything you said, but how much do you let him into your world with diabetes? Could you go to sleep for 24 hours and he could take care of you when you were not there? Or do you know what I mean? Or does he know enough to stop a problem? What's your line of letting him into this world?
So he's the emotional support. anything I feel like I can talk to him about.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's a little bit squeamish. I had to convince him the first time to, like, I probably inserted like 3 or 4 Dexcom insertions and then finally convinced him, like, no, it's okay, you can watch it.
Yeah.
So he's a little bit squeamish there. So I don't think that I would necessarily have him, change my pod or anything like that. But he's very much, he knows everything that I learned that I'm super excited to tell him about. Or with OmniPod, I started decorating pods, and I'll show him, like, oh, look how cute this is,
Mm-hmm.
So he's into, like, that part of it.
At this point in the interview, my dogs go crazy. Let's fast forward through the craziness till when I come back. I'm going to start recording again. Indy is getting older, and little creaks and bumps now, I think, sound different to him than they did when he was younger. So he just went at the front door like the military was coming in, and there's no one there. So
that happens to me. I have a dachshund and a terrier, and they're locked upstairs right now.
Let me just say that I recognize that because in your Skype picture, you are wearing...
Oh, yeah.
You're wearing shirts with those 2 dogs on them. It's fantastic.
We are, yeah.
All right, so now Indy's going through his ritual. He's been up, so he might as well get something to drink. Is everything good, buddy? You want to go late? Now Basil has decided that if Indy's going to drink something, why not me too? Well, at least they did it right around the halfway point, so we could put a break in the podcast right here. By the way, before we get back to it, and we are recording, but you are very loose and relaxed, and you sound like you're comfortable. Are you feeling okay?
Yeah, I'm feeling... it's better after we started talking, yeah.
It's probably doesn't it just feel like we're on the phone, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. All right, hold on a second. I'm going to get rid of these water bowls, and then I will be right back, and we'll get going.
Okay.
Okay, guys. That's enough. Okay. There we go. Go lay down. Go ahead. Go lay down. Go ahead. Go lay down. Go. Go lay down in your bed. Go get in your bed. All right, Katie. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Let me get a drink too, I guess, while everyone's drinking. Okay, so your life is a little exhausting when I'm talking about it. When I'm listening to you talk, it just seems like well more than I would hope you would have had to have gone through. But at the same time, you're still very young, and it sounds like you're on a completely different path at this point. So let's try to find the positive in this, right? Your time ignoring your diabetes, what is it taught you?
One, to not put things off. Complications are something that I'm still, fortunately, I don't have any right now, but it's something that, like, I'm paying a lot more close attention to, and I feel like sometimes it's like, well, I may have already done the damage and it's going to happen soon. And so I feel like being able to think of things first, like, I don't know, be able to look at the long term instead of the short term, I think is something that I've realized. And then also another thing is, like, it's okay to be able to tell someone, like, I'm sorry, I have to step away for a second. I have low blood sugar, or just eat, an Airhead in front of them, or
do what
like
you need
whatever
to do.
it is.
Yeah.
Because nobody actually cares that much once you, like, come to the realization of it. Like, either they're going to be like, oh, okay, or they're going to, and the people who do are ridiculous. So
Right. I mean, really, to me, the lesson in this is that anybody who would, I wish I was younger so I could say something hip like throw shade at you or something. I don't really know what any of that means, but like anybody who would make you feel uncomfortable for doing what you need to do, whatever that may be, is not really someone whose opinion I care about. I wouldn't spend, and this is where it's probably more specific to me or people who have grown up like me or feel like I do or whatever, but I don't give any thought to things like that. You know, like I couldn't possibly care less if someone didn't like what we were doing and it needed to be done. You know what I mean? And I would never give it a moment's thought afterwards either. And it sounds like you're getting a little closer to that too. And you're from what part of are you comfortable saying what part of the country you're from?
Yeah, so I'm from Utah.
Okay, because in the beginning of the conversation, as you described like a really well-meaning neighbor that stepped in and helped, and then you talked about, you know, a nurse who was a friend of the family who went to school and spoke for you. I was like, wow, she might be from like storybook land. But then you kept talking, and I was like, oh no, never mind. So that's not. Those were the only two people she knew that were nice. And so, you know, and so I mean, the lessons there. It's funny. They're not exactly medical lessons. They're more life lessons, really. Like, you know, what you talked about is about looking forward and not putting off tomorrow and things like that. I think that's incredibly useful. It's powerful information for anybody in any part of your life. You can't just look at the floor and just concentrate on today. You have to see the bigger picture. I was just talking about this on the phone with someone the other day when we were talking about like elevated people who get very accustomed to accepting an elevated blood sugar because it doesn't seem that high. You know, I was talking to somebody the other day who's like, oh, you know, the blood sugar got to 240 and, you know, we waited a little longer. And I was like, what were you waiting for? You know, at 240, your blood sugar's triple what it really should be, you know? And so what was it you were waiting for? Well, I wanted to see if this was going to happen or if the insulin was going to do something. And so we talked through it and I was like, it was never going to happen. Like, you know what I mean? Like you started a meal at 150 of a blood sugar. You bolused for what you thought you needed, but you didn't pre-bolus. So by the time the insulin started working, you were 250. You know, it started to drop a little bit, but that blood sugar is always going to stay about right there because not only did you start high, did the blood sugar get higher because there was no pre-bolus, but once, you know, the insulin was really peaking and working, you only had enough insulin for the blood sugar of 150. You really started around 240, 250. So you already didn't have enough insulin for that other 100 points. It was never going to come down. Yeah. And you know, like I said, I think maybe you ought to just be more aggressive with the insulin. You know, if your blood sugar is that high, you've either mistimed or miscalculated how much insulin you need. And the response back was very, you know, the person understood what I was talking about and they were totally going on, but there was that initial feeling of like, well, it was only another hour, you know, and everybody gets so comfortable with, oh, my blood sugar was high, but it only took me 2 hours to get it down. And I'll say, well, like, it, you know, don't get me wrong, Katie, and everybody listening, things go wrong. It happens all the time, you know, but day to day, for the most part, your blood sugar probably doesn't need to get into the 250s if you've, like I said, had some of those nuanced ideas of how to handle some of the things. Yeah. And that's not the big issue. People learn those things. You know, like you have bad experiences like that. You take the data from it. You figure out how to do it better next time. That's all well and good. That's not the part that worried me. The part that worried me was just well, it's just a couple hours. Except it's just a couple hours after this meal and just a couple hours after that meal and just a couple hours overnight. And, you know, well, Saturday was this. And then before you know it, is it just a couple hours? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, and by the time you actually bolus or give insulin, then that's at least another hour before, you know, it's really peaking. So
I would much rather, I'll say it till the end, I would much rather fight with a low blood sugar for a couple of minutes, stop a falling blood sugar, something like that,
right,
and get it straight than I would want to spend 5 hours fighting with a high.
Yeah.
You know?
No, low blood sugar is, you know, 10 minutes, the sugar's working. High blood sugar, that's at least an hour if you took care of it immediately.
Right. Yeah. It's all right there. I'm sorry, I'm actually talking to Arden about her blood sugar. So she was in one of those situations where it was just a cacophony of things happen right before you and I were going to talk. My my son came downstairs a half an hour before you and I were going to talk and said, hey, I really need to eat something. And then he's doing SAT prep. He's like, then I have a 4-hour SAT prep test I have to take up in my room. And I want to do this. And he's like, and can I get my head shaved today? And I was like, yeah. And Arden, who's been living the bum's lifestyle this summer, going to bed at 2:00 in the morning and getting up at noon and things like that. And so she comes rolling downstairs like 15 minutes before you and I are going to talk. And she's like, I'm hungry. And I was like, but Katie and I are about to do the podcast. And, oh, hold on a second. She needs something. So I rarely have to do this, but she's upstairs and she needs something. Can I take a second?
Yeah, no problem.
All right, I'll come back and tell you all about it. Hold on one second. So we've had a dog interruption. We might as well have a low blood sugar interruption. After a couple of minutes, I come back and tell Katie all about it. Katie, I'm back. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so let me catch my breath, and I'm going to tell you exactly what happened. Because I think that, oh my gosh, because I think that you probably heard me running back and forth a couple times. Because I think that being transparent about this stuff, and people always say, oh gosh, when you tell me how this happened, it all sounds like it's always so positive. Mm-hmm. And I say things like, I'd rather battle with a low than fight with a high, and maybe that sounds arbitrary or pie in the sky or something like that. But here's what just happened. So one more deep breath, because geez, Katie, am I out of shape? So at 11:45, Arden tells me she's hungry, but I'm very low on time because Katie and I are about to talk on the podcast. And I'm sure everybody gets into that situation where you're rushing around for food. So what can you grab real quickly in 5 seconds? There's not a lot. So Arden says, well, I tested my blood sugar and I'm 93. So how about if I just have a bowl of cereal? She's like, just give me a big Prebolus and I'll have a bowl of cereal and it'll be cool. And, I'm like, all right, so fine. Usually cereal's kind of kept for more panicky situations, but every once in a while, no big deal. And I give Arden her bolus and we get her cereal and she goes upstairs. And now she's lounging in her bed, having eaten her cereal almost, probably an hour ago by now, a little less. And you and I are talking. And I look over at her glucose monitor, and it says 42 arrows down.
Oh.
So, okay. In my mind, while you and I are talking, I think, I know how much I gave her. I know how much she ate. I know what the pre-bolus was. It seems unlikely to me that she's 42 down, but that seems like something we should look into. So as you and I are talking a moment ago, I text her, hey, test, and I get back from her, I can't find my PDM. And I'm like, okay, well then just start drinking a juice and then let's find your PDM. I don't have a juice. So, okay. So you and I say goodbye for a second. I grab a juice box. I go upstairs. Excuse me. I give it to her and I'm like, here, start drinking this. Try to get half of it in. And we'll test your blood sugar. But we can't find her PDM. Now, we know we used it in her room to give her the pre-bolus. And it's not there. And it's we're looking around. We're moving blankets. I'm on my knees looking under the bed. It's comical. Partly in the back of my head, I'm like, I need to find the PDM, obviously, because I need to test to be sure what her blood sugar is. And 42 down, if it really is 42 down, she's in trouble. So maybe the PDM's downstairs. So I go all the way back downstairs. I walk all through the house. It's not there. I go back upstairs. As I come back upstairs, now that we've moved the blankets, I can see that the PDM is just behind the laptop that she's watching Netflix on, which is Arden's summertime addiction. She's power watching some television show. So I'm like, oh, it's right here. I hold it up. She laughs at me. She goes, I don't feel low. And I'm like, okay. And so we test, and she's 64. So 64 is not, of course, optimal. I wasn't hoping for 64 an hour afterwards, but it's certainly not the end of the world. Is she 64 2 down? I'm not sure. But she drank juice, and, it's going to be okay. I am now down here talking to you again with no anxiety in my heart whatsoever.
Yeah.
And so I've seen this enough. I know what this is. I know how to handle it. I can tell you right now that my guess is that by the time you and I get done talking in about 15 minutes, that Arden's CGM will be right back to probably, I don't know, 90. You know, she'll probably be diagonal up even. I'll probably end up higher than we want to be after this cereal, but because of the juice. But so it's just slightly mistimed. And while that seems like a terrible thing to deal with, I still maintain that this situation is better than her blood sugar being 380 for 3 hours.
Yeah.
That's just honestly how I feel about it. So, and are you finding that too?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that I kind of been more like it used to be the opposite. If I was low, you know, go in and eat the kitchen, as everyone says.
Right. Yeah, sure.
But yeah, I think that was something actually that was interesting, learning how to control when I'm low, just eat a certain amount, because dealing with, you know, a 300 blood sugar afterwards that's when complications come. That's when things happen.
That's when you start trading comfort today against your long-term health. When you start thinking, I'd rather not be a little scared. I'd rather not be scared is how you figure it. I'd rather not be in some dire situation, and then whatever comes. But I'm hoping that talking about something that just literally happened right now live and showing people how I feel about it, I'm hoping that it helps them see that it's still better to deal with this every once in a while. Like, keep in mind, this doesn't happen, you know, very often to us. You know, maybe it happens, you know, like this, I don't know, every 5 weeks, you know, something like that. But I'd rather deal with this a half a dozen times a year than for the opposite to be true constantly, because I fear this happening. Now, Katie, this is about the time we say that nothing you hear on the Juicebox podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Talk to your doctor, et cetera, et cetera. And I mentioned to you that I would not nearly be this bold without a glucose monitor.
Absolutely.
It would be very difficult for me to do that. So, you know, so maybe it's not for everybody, but there's a portion of it that you could do without a glucose monitor. You could be a little more aggressive. You could test a little more frequently if you're going to Prebolus. You know, there are steps you could take to still put yourself in a better situation. Arden's endo appointment is, I think, next week. I have absolutely no idea what it's going to be, but I don't expect it to be too high. I don't expect it to move too much from where it was last time. And I expect to be able to come back on here and tell you it's been 3 solid years of her having an A1C somewhere around 6. And that to me is, I think it's worth this, I guess. And, you know, it just sort of is what it is until technology moves forward more, you know, maybe artificial pancreas algorithms keep stuff like this from happening. Maybe the insulins get better. Maybe a lot of things happen. But until then, this is the game, you know. So anyway.
Yeah.
And you have a unique perspective on the other side of it. So how often do you consider the time you spent with your blood sugar that high? And do you live worried about what's coming? Or do you try not to?
So anything that happens that is kind of like a normal, like, oh, I've got a Charlie horse or something like that, it always crosses my mind, like, oh, that could be something else. I should look into this. And, you know, I go and Google all the symptoms. And I'm actually in school right now and I'm taking human diseases.
Okay.
And it's made me a hypochondriac.
That's funny.
And so, like, everything, like, I kind of do it with everything. Like, oh, I have that. And then I go and look and it's like, actually, I don't have that. But
that's hilarious. What diseases have you considered for a few moments that you have?
So one that's actually interesting, one thing that I do actually have that there isn't a lot of research on, and I used to think it was a diabetes complication. It's called necrobiosis lipoidica diabeticorum, which is a mouthful, but it's like red spots on your shins.
Okay.
And it's caused from broken blood vessels. And And that's kind of all it is unless it ulcerates. But I used to think that was a diabetes complication, which really upset me. Like, look what I've done to myself. But then I've read more research on it, and they actually don't know what causes it.
Isn't that interesting?
People without diabetes get it. So
you were beating yourself up over nothing, maybe.
Well, but it was probably part of the reason that I got a wake-up call. So.
Oh, no kidding. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Whatever gets you there, right? That's definitely that's the motto to live by, I think. Wow.
I've also thought I've had ptosis, which is like your eye drooping. So I'll like go and stare at the mirror, and I'll ask my husband, like, do you think that my face is drooping? And he'll be like, no. And I've asked a coworker before, like, do you think this side of my face is a little bit lower? And no.
Katie, are you still reading about things? Is that so? What's the degree you're looking for? What are you trying to accomplish?
I think it was something I was looking for more at the beginning, and I don't know if you've ever browsed Reddit in the diabetes subreddit.
Not too much, but I know it exists, and I've been through it a couple of times for sure.
So anytime they post anything, which is, well, when I used to browse it more often, I haven't for a while, but whenever they would, post something, I'd be like, oh, yeah, maybe I have that. I know, and go Google it.
So, but you said you're in school, right?
I am in school, yeah.
And what's your degree going to be in?
Community health education.
And what do you hope to do with that?
So that plus some other certifications and stuff, I actually hope to be a diabetes educator.
Excellent. Where someday you will offer someone a hug instead of telling them their feet are going to fall off.
Yes, and I definitely think it's something, that more diabetics being involved in diabetes care is something that I think is greatly needed. So
just having that actual like real life perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I that's really good. That's amazing of you, and I think you are 100% right. It would be nice. Excuse me. It would be nice not to say that after a year, most people end up knowing more about their diabetes than their doctor. It would be nice to say that my doctor is always offering me something new as I come in the door, instead of I just go there to get my A1C done and I leave with my new scripts and that's the end of it.
Well, and I think with, new technology coming out and tighter control, I've heard a lot of people that are getting yelled at almost for having an A1C of a 6 or below a 6. And, that's where mine sits. Unfortunately, I have a endocrinologist right now that's like, hey, you're doing awesome. But some people are being told like, oh, you should raise your alert to 80 or, to 100 because that A1C is just too low. And I think that that's old information. I think that's like something kind of common in the medical field in general, that doctors sometimes are telling you what they learned in school, and they're not necessarily keeping up on like what's
happening now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know a doctor who won't see doctors that are over a certain age.
Yeah.
And he just says that they fall out of touch at some point. Probably not everybody, but to some degree or another. And it's really interesting because my endo will ask me, how many lows did you have? And I'll tell her like, well, I don't know. We've had like a panicky thing once every 4 or 5 weeks. I've seen Arden go into the mid 50s and sit there for a little while overnight. It takes me a little while to bring it back up again. But, no 20s or anything crazy, nothing scary. And I think that's when you can't see the data, that what the doctor's saying is, wow, if your A1C is this low, I don't believe you have good control of your blood sugar. So I'm more apt to believe that you're getting insanely low sometimes and it's skewing this A1C. And that's their fear. And then so instead of saying that to you or taking steps to find out if it's true or not, they just say, well, raise your A1C a little bit so I don't have to worry about you getting too low. Yeah. It's a backwards concept, actually.
Yeah. And with people with a CGM, it kind of shows like how little they're looking into the information. There's a graph right there that tells you your hypoglycemic risk.
And no one's even paying attention to it. Like I have it right here for you to look at. Did you want to read it? And maybe they don't even know what they're looking at. You never know.
Yeah.
Katie, this has been an odd hour, as I've never had to run away from the microphone so many times in an hour, which is why most of the ones I have scheduled to record in the upcoming future are going to be after my children go back to school. But in the end, it sort of made an opportunity to talk about something in a very real way. So I'm glad it happened, and I'm really thrilled that you came on, and I'm happy you don't feel as nervous as you did when you started. So, do you have any? Did I miss anything? I know you could, because you were the one that asked to come on. So is there something we didn't talk about that you wish we would have?
No, I think just kind of be comfortable with diabetes and I heard the podcast with Ian, right? The 14-year-old.
Yeah, he was so cool.
And I definitely see the value in being able to, keep things private when they need to be private, but I think that not being afraid to just let diabetes be a part of your life, I guess, don't embrace it and not.
Yeah. I think, and I know Ian listens, so hey Ian, what's up? I think that everybody's perspective grows in time, and I think Ian's will too. And you can almost see when he's speaking where he's going to end up. He's just not there yet. And I think that all of us are in that situation, and it's probably good to remember that at some point that you're just in the middle of a growth, and that you will probably not feel tomorrow the way you feel today. That sort of thing. But it was really really valuable to hear you say it, to hear him say it, and to remember that wanting to stay private's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
So everybody's got their own way of dealing. And they all need to be respected. So you guys were great. He was great for coming on, and so were you. I really, really genuinely appreciate you doing this. Tell me your dog's names again. So there's a Scotty Terrier. Is that right? Yeah.
So her name is Kai.
Mm-hmm. And what about?
And then the dachshund is Sophie.
Nice.
And she's crazy.
Will they go nuts when you release them after you get off?
So we actually are usually upstairs, so I think they'll be okay. They bark at phantom noises and stuff. In fact, I don't know if you heard them barking because they're kind of far away.
I heard them a couple times, sure.
Okay. Yeah.
That's great. Well, it's very cool. Are you and your husband, my last question was, and I'm sorry to act like I'm ending and then remember that I wanted to ask you one more thing, but after you've had all that time with your blood sugar high and you're worried about complications, etc., and you're in a new marriage, are you thinking about having children?
That is a good question. I think that we probably aren't going to have kids for more than just diabetes, but it plays a part. But we are people who like to travel a lot, and we're both very into our career. He's a programmer, so he's having fun doing that, and it's not something that we see right now. I think that people always tell us we'll change our minds, and it's well, I'm 27, but
I wouldn't want to tell you that you change your mind. I don't think that. I think it's more likely that you'll go to a wedding, come home a little inebriated, and end up with a baby 9 months later than it is that you'll change your mind. But I think that I don't think you'll change your mind. I think that it's really brave and strong of you to say that this is who we are, and we're not going to buckle to societal pressures about what it is we're supposed to be doing. This is how we want to live our lives, and this is what we're going to do. I think that's fantastic. Yeah, I think it's a pretty foreign concept in Utah where I'm from, but
listen,
whatever. Again, Katie, don't forget a little bit of whatever, right? A little bit of I don't care what you think doesn't hurt anybody at all. All right, well, I really appreciate you coming on, and thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, thank you.